Thanksgiving Day used to mean warmth, the smell of turkey roasting, football on TV, and my late wife Martha humming along to the radio while setting the table. But that year, the house was silent. 6 months since she passed. Silence had become my only companion. My old Chevrolet idled in the driveway while snow thickened on the windshield. I stared at my neighbor's text. Police cars at the Hendersons again. Domestic situation. Made me think of you and your family worries. That line hit something deep. The Hendersons had a grandson, too. Same age as mine. Amos. Martha used to worry about that boy. She'd worry about everything. Really, right up until the day she didn't have to anymore. Now it was just me, a tank full of gas, and that gnawing feeling that wouldn't quit every time I thought about Leona, my daughter, and her husband, Wilbur. The clock read 2:30 p.m. I had debated calling ahead, but something inside told me to just go. Maybe it was loneliness, maybe instinct. Either way, I shifted into reverse and backed out onto Miller Street, the tires crunching over new snow. The sky had turned that heavy gray that means winter's got no mercy left. On the radio, the same classic rock station Martha and I always listened to played Led Zeppelin, something dark and restless that fit my mood. On the passenger seat sat 2 gift bags. One held a new leather baseball glove for Amos, the kind that costs more than I should have spent on my pension. The other had a stack of comic books, superheroes. Old-fashioned but timeless. Amos was 18 now. But I figured you're never too old for heroes. Family is all we have left, Martha always said. I could almost hear her voice saying it again. Maybe that's why I was making the drive, to remind my daughter that family still meant something. The windshield wipers fought the snow. The world outside turned into streaks of white and gray. Every car on the road crawled like it was afraid to move. No one in their right mind would drive on a day like that. But I wasn't in my right mind. I was a lonely old man trying to feel useful again. By the time I hit the I-75 South exit toward Cincinnati, the storm had turned from flurries to full whiteout. I stopped at a gas station halfway there, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights that hum like they're tired too. The clerk, a young guy with sleepy eyes, looked me up and down. Roads are getting nasty. Sir, you driving far? Just to Cincinnati. Family dinner, I said, handing him a crumpled bill. He shook his head. Be careful out there. Saw 3 wrecks already today. Back in the truck, I checked my watch. 3:05 p.m. Normally it was a 45-minute trip. That day, it'd be closer to an hour. But I didn't mind. Maybe the storm was buying me time to think about how I'd fix things with Leona. We hadn't spoken properly in months. Every call ended the same. Me trying to ask about Amos. Her changing the subject. The last time we saw each other, I noticed a bruise on the boy's arm when we went fishing. He said he fell off his bike, but the mark looked like fingers. Not an accident. I should have pushed harder. Martha would have. She always knew when someone was hiding pain. I turned off the highway at exit 15, heading into Leona's neighborhood, quiet suburban streets lined with 2-story houses and pumpkin wreaths. Christmas lights were already going up, twinkling through the snow. Through every glowing window I passed, I could see families laughing, eating, being together. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. That's how it should be, I thought. That's what Thanksgiving is supposed to look like. When Leona's house came into view, blue siding, white shutters, smoke curling from the chimney, it looked picture perfect. Warm, peaceful. I slowed down, already imagining Amos's face when he saw me. Maybe we'd finally have the heart-to-heart I'd been putting off. Maybe this visit could be a new start. But before I could knock, I saw him. Amos sat on the front steps, arms wrapped around his knees, wearing nothing but a thin shirt and jeans. Snowflakes clung to his hair. His lips were blue. His whole body trembled. Jesus Christ, I muttered, throwing open the truck door. The cold hit me like a slap. I ran toward him, heart pounding. Boots sliding on the ice. Amos, what are you doing out here? He looked up, and the relief in his eyes nearly broke me. Grandpa, his teeth chattered. I can't, I'm not allowed. I didn't let him finish. I wrapped my coat around his shoulders, pulling him close. His skin was ice. His breath came in shallow gasps. Not allowed what? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. He swallowed hard. Not allowed to go inside. I froze. The words didn't make sense at first. Behind us, through the windows, I could see shadows moving. Hear laughter. The faint clink of silverware on china. They were having Thanksgiving dinner. And my grandson was locked outside in 15-degree weather. For a second, I couldn't move. The sound of laughter from inside the house clashed so sharply with the sight in front of me that it almost didn't feel real. A warm glow spilled from the dining room window, golden and soft, while Amos, my grandson, sat trembling in the snow like some forgotten stray. I crouched beside him, wrapping my heavy coat tighter around his shaking shoulders. His skin was so cold it felt like stone. How long have you been out here, son? He looked down, his voice barely a whisper. Since this morning. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I checked my watch. 3:15 p.m. You've been out here for over 4 hours? He nodded, eyes darting toward the door like it could hear him. I'm not supposed to talk to anyone until Wilbur says I can. Wilbur, my daughter's husband, the man who'd convinced her he knew what was best for her son. The man I never trusted. I tried to keep my voice even. Why? What did you do? Amos swallowed hard. I was helping Mom with the turkey. I forgot to turn off the oven timer when I took it out to baste. The top got a little burnt. Wilbur said I ruined Thanksgiving. He told me I needed to think about my actions. The words hit like a hammer. So he locked you out of your own home? Amos didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence said enough. The anger started low, deep in my chest, steady as a heartbeat. Then it grew, climbing up my throat until I could taste it. But I forced myself to stay calm for the boy's sake. I guided him toward my truck, opened the passenger door, and helped him climb inside. Let's get you warm, I said, turning the heater to full blast. The engine rumbled, heat beginning to flow through the vents. We'll sit here until you can feel your hands again. He flinched as I reached to rub his frozen fingers between mine. That tiny movement, the kind that comes from habit, not surprise, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't the first time. Amos, I said quietly, has this happened before? He hesitated, eyes fixed on the dashboard lights. Then he nodded. Sometimes, when I mess up. Last month he made me sleep in the garage all night because I forgot to take the trash out. Before that, I broke one of his beer bottles and he locked me in the basement for 2 days. My chest tightened. And your mother knows about this? She says Wilbur's just trying to teach me discipline. That I need to learn responsibility. His voice cracked on the last word. Maybe she's right. Maybe I. Stop. I turned to face him fully. Don't you dare blame yourself for this. What he's doing isn't discipline, it's abuse. Amos's eyes filled with panic. Please, Grandpa, don't make a scene. If Wilbur hears you, he'll get mad. He'll take it out on me later. The boy's voice broke completely. And that was it. Something inside me snapped. I looked at that house again, its perfect decorations. The wreath on the door. The glow of a turkey dinner behind frost-tinted windows. And all I saw was cruelty dressed up as family. I'd lost Martha 6 months ago. And it had nearly destroyed me. But if there was one thing her death had taught me, it was this. You don't wait to do the right thing. Not when someone you love is in danger. Listen to me, I said, my voice steady, low, and final. You're coming home with me tonight. We'll figure out everything else later. Amos looked terrified. He won't let me leave. He'll call the police, say I stole something, or that you kidnapped me. Then he can explain to the police. I said, pulling my gloves tighter. Right now, you're packing your things. Before he could protest, I opened the truck door and stepped back into the storm. The snow bit at my face. But I barely felt it. I could feel Martha in my head. Her voice clear as if she were right beside me. Family is all we have left. And right then, family meant getting my grandson out of that house, no matter what it took. Amos followed me reluctantly, still wrapped in my coat. The front steps creaked under our boots as we approached the door. It was locked, of course. I looked at the door handle, at the wreath hanging perfectly centered, at the golden light glowing through the glass pane. My hands trembled, not from the cold anymore, but from the rage I'd been holding back for too long. "Grandpa," Amos whispered, voice shaking, "please, don't." But I'd already made up my mind. I'd been a factory worker for 40 years, built things with my hands. Fixed things. Broke things when I had to. And tonight, I was going to fix this family the only way left. I stepped back once, steadying my stance on the icy porch. Then I lifted my boot and kicked the door with everything I had. The wood splintered, the lock snapped, the door slammed open against the wall. Warm air burst out into the freezing night, along with the stunned silence of people who'd just seen their comfort shattered. The Thanksgiving feast lay before me, white tablecloth, silver candles, glasses of wine, laughter cut off mid-breath. And I stood in the doorway, snow swirling around me, my grandson shaking beside me, as I uttered 6 words that made every face at that table go pale. "He's coming home with me tonight." The air inside hit me like stepping into another world, warm, fragrant, comfortable. The smell of turkey and cinnamon filled the house. Every head at the dining table turned toward the door, frozen in mid-motion. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. Candles flickered. A football game played quietly on the TV in the background. I stood there with snow melting off my boots and fury boiling in my chest. Amos, still wrapped in my coat, trembled beside me. At the head of the table sat Wilbur, sleeves rolled neatly, carving knife in hand, the picture of control. His smile faded the instant he saw me. "Who gave you permission to come in here?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. I stepped farther inside, snow dripping onto the hardwood floor. "Permission? You think I need permission to check on my grandson when he's freezing outside?" Wilbur set the knife down slowly. His jaw tightened. "This is private property. You're trespassing." The younger girl at the table, his daughter from his first marriage, whimpered. Leona, my daughter, sat stiffly beside him in a green dress, her eyes wide and fearful. "Private property?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You mean the property where you locked a boy out in 15-degree weather? For 4 hours?" Leona's spoon clattered against her plate. "Dad, please, let's not." "Not what?" I barked. "Not talk about the fact that your son nearly froze to death on your front steps while you were eating dinner?" Wilbur pushed his chair back, rising slowly. He was a big man, heavier than I remembered. Taller too, but I'd worked steel for 40 years. I wasn't scared of size. I'd seen harder men crumble under less. He crossed his arms, feigning calm. "You're overreacting." He needed to learn responsibility. "The boy burned the turkey and ruined our meal. This is discipline, not abuse." "Discipline?" I could barely contain my voice. "That's what you call child abuse now?" "He's 18, Wilbur said coolly, "not a child. And in my house, adults follow rules or face consequences." The room went so silent I could hear the faint crackle of the fireplace. I took one step closer. "Then your rules are garbage." Behind me, Amos's breathing hitched. I looked at him, pale, exhausted, still shaking from the cold, and that was the final spark I needed. I pointed straight at Wilbur. "Look at him. You think this is teaching him responsibility? He's half frozen. You could have killed him." Wilbur smirked, a thin, cruel line across his face. "He's fine. A little cold never hurt anyone." Leona's voice trembled. "Dad, please, you're making a scene." "A scene?" I turned toward her, disbelief in my voice. "He made a scene when he left your son outside to suffer. And you sat here pretending nothing was wrong. You call that parenting?" Leona looked down, shame flickering in her eyes. "Wilbur was just." "Just what?" I snapped. "Just being a man? Just doing what's best for the family. That's the excuse you tell yourself, isn't it?" "Enough," Wilbur roared, slamming his hands on the table. The wine glasses rattled, and the little girl burst into tears. "This is my home. You don't come in here shouting at me like some old fool who doesn't understand discipline." I took a slow breath and leaned in close enough that he could see the fury in my eyes. "I understand plenty," I said quietly. "I understand what fear looks like on a child's face. I understand what happens when men like you think they can break people in the name of discipline." He glared down at me, nostrils flaring. You don't get to tell me how to raise my family. That's the thing, I said, straightening up. You're not raising a family. You're ruling a prison. The words landed heavy. Leona covered her mouth. Wilbur's face went red. You have 30 seconds, I said, my voice low and even, to apologize to my grandson and promise this will never happen again. Wilbur laughed, that smug, dismissive laugh that men like him always have when they think they're untouchable. I don't owe that boy anything. If he doesn't like how I do things, he can leave. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I nodded once. You're right, I said softly. He can leave. I turned to Amos, whose eyes had gone wide. Go get your things, son. You're coming home with me. The silence in that house was deafening. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. Wilbur's face twisted. You can't just take him. You walk out that door with him. I'll have you arrested for kidnapping. I smiled, not kindly. Good luck explaining to the cops why your stepson was sitting outside in 5-degree weather for half the day. Leona's breath caught. Dad, please. But I didn't stop. I'd seen enough cowards hide behind their titles and their walls. I wasn't leaving without that boy. Amos, I said, motioning toward the stairs. Pack your bag, now. He hesitated for half a second, then nodded and started moving. Wilbur stepped in front of me, his face close, breath hot with wine. You're making a big mistake, old man. I stared right back. The only mistake I ever made was trusting you with my daughter and grandson. For the first time that night, I saw something flicker in his eyes, fear. Behind us, the laughter, the warmth, the illusion of family, it all shattered. Amos's footsteps creaked on the stairs as he disappeared down the hallway. Moving fast, like he was afraid Wilbur might change his mind about letting him go. I stood in the living room, facing the man who'd made my grandson live in fear under his own roof. Wilbur's face was flushed red, whether from anger or alcohol. I couldn't tell. His jaw clenched tight as he pointed a trembling finger at me. You have no right to interfere in my household. I took a slow breath, steady but sharp. When your household endangers someone I love, I have every right in the world. Leona stood frozen near the table, hands gripping her napkin like it was an anchor. Please, she said, her voice cracking. Let's just calm down. We can talk this through after dinner. After dinner? I barked out a bitter laugh. Your son was outside freezing while you were cutting turkey. And you want to talk after dinner? Her eyes filled with tears. But she said nothing. Silence. The same silence that had enabled Wilbur all these years. Wilbur stepped closer, puffing out his chest, trying to fill the room with his presence. You're lucky I don't press charges for breaking my door. You kicked it in like some kind of criminal. I kicked it in, I said coldly, because you locked out a child in deadly weather. You think I care about your damn door? He scoffed. 18 is old enough to know responsibility. He's not a child. I took another step forward, close enough to smell the expensive bourbon on his breath. He's my grandson, and if you think for 1 second that I'm walking away from this, think again. Leona flinched at the edge in my voice. Dad, please, she whispered. You'll just make things worse. For who? I demanded. For the man who's been starving, locking, and humiliating your son for 3 years? Her face crumpled, tears spilling freely now. You don't understand. He's trying to help us. Wilbur provides everything. I turned to her fully. And in exchange for that, you let him destroy your boy's spirit? Martha would have never stood for this. Leona. At the mention of her mother's name, something flickered in Leona's eyes, guilt. Maybe shame. Maybe the faint memory of who she used to be before fear took over. Wilbur slammed his palm against the wall, making her jump. That's enough. You don't come into my house lecturing my wife about how we run our family. I met his glare, unflinching. You don't have a family. You have hostages. That stopped him cold. The color drained from his face, replaced with pure rage. You're done here, he hissed. Take your coat, your lectures, and get out before I. Before you what? I cut in sharply. Throw me out like you threw Amos? Go ahead, try. He took one heavy step forward, but before he could get any closer, Amos reappeared at the top of the stairs, duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His voice shook. but there was steel beneath it. I'm ready, Grandpa. Leona turned toward him, eyes wide. Amos, please, don't do this. This is your home. He stopped halfway down the steps, looking right at her. No, Mom, it's his house, and it's never been a home. That one sentence hit her harder than any shout could. Wilbur scoffed. Ungrateful little brat, you think you can just walk out? You wouldn't last a week on your own. Then it's a good thing he's not alone, I said, moving toward the stairs. Over my dead body, Wilbur growled. I turned slowly. That can be arranged. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fireplace and the low hum of the furnace. Wilbur took another step toward me, testing, daring, but then he stopped. Something in my eyes must have told him I meant every word. I placed a steady hand on Amos's shoulder and nodded toward the door. Come on, son. We walked past the table, past the untouched plates and candles that had burned too long. When we reached the doorway, I turned one last time. Wilbur stood rigid, fists clenched. Leona stood beside him, torn apart inside. You have no idea what you've done, Wilbur said through gritted teeth. You've just ruined your daughter's life. No, I said quietly, I just saved my grandson's. Amos and I stepped out into the cold, the snow swirling around us again. The night air bit at our faces. But this time, the chill felt honest, clean, not like the false warmth we just escaped. We climbed into the truck. I started the engine, the heater humming to life. Amos stared out the window as we backed out of the driveway. The house shrinking behind us, its lights soft, its laughter dead. Grandpa, he said after a long silence, do you think Mom will ever leave him? I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. One day, I said, when she remembers what love is supposed to look like. We drove through the snow until the house disappeared completely. The road ahead was long, dark, and dangerous, but for the first time all night, I felt peace. Because for once, I knew exactly what Martha would have wanted me to do. The drive home was silent except for the hum of the heater and the soft rasp of snow under the tires. Amos sat beside me, still wrapped in my coat, staring out the window like he was afraid the world might vanish if he blinked. I didn't rush him. After what he'd endured, silence was the safest place he could hide for now. When we finally turned onto my street, the storm had slowed. The old oak tree in front of my house was heavy with snow, and the porch light glowed like a small, steady promise in the darkness. I parked the truck and let the engine tick quietly before speaking. Home sweet home, I said softly. Amos gave a small, uncertain smile as I opened his door. Together we carried his duffel bag inside. The warmth of the house hit us immediately, the scent of coffee and the faint trace of lavender from Martha's old sachets still clinging to the curtains. He stopped just inside the doorway, hesitant. It smells like Grandma, he whispered. I swallowed hard. Yeah, I said, it always will. He looked around, eyes darting from the framed photos on the wall to the fireplace. I remember this place. I used to sleep on that couch when I was little. You still can, I said, half smiling, but I think your old room is better. Sheets are clean, extra blankets in the closet. Go get warm. While he unpacked, I busied myself in the kitchen, thawing a couple of chicken breasts and putting water on for tea. The rhythm of it, chopping vegetables, setting the table, steadied me. I'd done it 1,000 times for Martha, and somehow it felt right doing it again tonight. For her grandson. Amos came out wearing one of my flannel shirts, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. It hung loose on him, but he looked less pale now, a little more alive. Hungry? I asked. He nodded, settling into a chair, starving. We ate quietly, the kind of quiet that felt like healing instead of tension. Halfway through dinner, I asked, has this been going on the whole time they've been married? He hesitated, pushing his food around the plate. Yeah, it started small, extra chores, long lectures. Then he started controlling everything. What I ate, when I could sleep. He said I had to earn privileges. And your mom? He sighed. She'd tell me to just do what he said, that it was easier that way. I think she's scared of him too. That hurt to hear, but I nodded slowly. Well, that ends tonight. Amos looked up. You really think he'll let it go? No, I admitted. Men like Wilbur never just let go. But he's not going to touch you again. Not while I'm breathing. For the first time all day, I saw a hint of hope flicker across his face. Later, after dinner, we sat by the fireplace. The flames danced against the glass, painting the room in gold and orange. Amos told me about school, his grades, the scholarship he'd been too afraid to apply for because Wilbur said he wasn't smart enough. By the time the clock hit 9, he was fighting sleep. Go get some rest, I said. You're safe here. He stood, hesitating just long enough to whisper, "Thank you, Grandpa." I smiled. "Anytime, son." When his door closed, I finally let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. For the first time since Martha's funeral, the house felt alive again. I was cleaning up the dishes when headlights flashed through the front window. At first, I thought it was just a neighbor, until I saw 2 beams cut across the driveway and stop right in front of my porch. Then came the knock, 3 sharp, heavy raps, the kind that don't ask permission. They demand attention. I froze, towel still in my hand. The knock came again, louder this time. Bang, bang, bang. "Grandpa?" Amos's sleepy voice called from down the hall. "Stay in your room," I said quietly. "Don't open that door, no matter what." I walked to the front window and peeked through the curtain. 2 police officers stood on the porch, flashlights cutting through the falling snow. And behind them, like vultures waiting to feed, were Wilbur and Leona. My jaw clenched. Another knock. "Mr. Burke, this is the police. We need to speak with you." I opened the door halfway, keeping my body between them and the view of the hallway. "Evening, officers. What's this about?" Wilbur's voice cut through the cold like a blade. "That man kidnapped my stepson, broke into my house and took him against his will." The lead officer raised a hand. "Sir, please let us handle this. Mr. Burke, is a young man named Amos Green here?" I met his gaze squarely. "Yes, he's here. My grandson is safe and warm inside." Wilbur stepped forward, pointing like a prosecutor. "You see? He admits it. He broke my door, took the boy. He's delusional. He's been trying to ruin my family for years." "Enough," I said sharply. "Officer, my grandson was left outside for over 4 hours in 5-degree weather. No coat, no hat, nothing. He could have died out there." The younger officer looked at me, then at Wilbur. "Is that true, sir?" Wilbur scoffed. "He's exaggerating. It was maybe an hour, and he had a sweater. He needed to learn responsibility." I folded my arms. Responsibility doesn't mean frostbite. The older officer's expression hardened. "We're going to need everyone inside to give statements." I stepped aside, letting them in, but kept Wilbur at arm's length. Leona trailed behind him, eyes puffy and downcast, like she hadn't stopped crying since we left. Amos appeared in the hallway, hesitant, the blanket still around his shoulders. The moment the officers saw him, pale, shivering, hands raw from the cold, the tension in the room changed. "Son," the officer said gently, "did this man force you to come with him?" Amos looked from me to Wilbur. His voice was small but steady. "No, sir, I wanted to come. Grandpa saved me." "Saved you from what?" "From freezing to death on the porch." Wilbur opened his mouth, but the officer held up a hand. "Let the boy speak." Amos continued, voice trembling but firm. "He made me sit outside because I burned the turkey. He said I couldn't come back in until I'd learned a lesson. It was morning when he did it. I was still out there when Grandpa showed up." Leona's hand went to her mouth. Her knees buckled slightly. The officer turned to her. "Ma'am, is that true?" She hesitated, glancing at Wilbur, the man who'd stolen her will. Then, with a trembling voice, she whispered, "Yes, it's true." The entire room went still. The silence that followed Leona's confession was thick and sharp, like the air right before a storm breaks. The officers looked at each other. One scribbled something in his notepad while the other studied Wilbur, whose face had gone from red to a ghostly white. "Leona," Wilbur said through clenched teeth, "don't do this. You're tired. You don't know what you're saying." But she didn't stop. Her voice was shaking. "Yes, but stronger than I'd ever heard it. I know exactly what I'm saying. You locked my son out of his home on Thanksgiving Day. You told me not to let him in. You said it would build character. Leona, Wilbur snapped. Enough. The lead officer took a step between them. Sir, step back. Wilbur tried to laugh it off, but it came out forced. Brittle. You're really going to take the word of a scared woman and a rebellious teenager over mine? This is absurd. The second officer spoke up. Sir, the boy's condition speaks for itself. His hands are still blue. You're lucky we're not calling an ambulance right now. I stood quietly by the fireplace, arms folded, watching everything unfold. Martha used to say, truth has a way of finding its voice, even if it trembles when it speaks. And now, after 3 years of fear, Leona was finally speaking. Wilbur tried again, desperate now. Leona, tell them your father has been poisoning Amos against me for years. He's always hated me. This is all his doing. She turned on him with sudden, fierce anger. No, Wilbur, you did this yourself. You made me afraid to speak. You made me believe I had to choose between keeping peace and keeping my son safe. But I'm done living that way. The first officer nodded slightly, almost as if he respected her courage. Ma'am, has this kind of punishment happened before? Leona's eyes filled with tears. But she didn't look away. Yes, too many times. He's made Amos sleep in the garage, in the basement, even outside. He controls when he can eat, when he can shower, when he can talk. Wilbur's voice cracked like a whip. You're lying. But no one believed him anymore. The officer reached for his cuffs. Sir, I'm placing you under arrest for child endangerment and abuse. Wilbur stepped back, panic flashing in his eyes. You can't do this. He's 18. He's not even a minor. 18 doesn't mean immune from the law. The officer said flatly. What you did was reckless endangerment. You left a young man outside in life-threatening temperatures for hours. That's a crime. The metallic click of the handcuffs cut through the room. Wilbur froze as the officer tightened them around his wrists. The sight of it, that arrogant man finally powerless, was almost biblical. As they read him his rights, Wilbur turned his glare on me. You'll regret this, old man. You've destroyed everything. You'll lose your daughter. You'll lose everything. I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. You lost everything the day you decided cruelty was the same thing as strength. Leona covered her mouth as the officers led Wilbur toward the door. His boots left dirty tracks across the floor, marring the polished perfection of the home he'd ruled with fear. Outside, the red and blue lights flashed against the snow, reflecting off the window panes. When the door closed behind them, the house fell silent, a silence so pure it almost hurt. Leona sank into a chair, shaking, tears spilling freely. What have I done? She whispered. Amos knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her arm. You did the right thing. Mom. I should have protected you sooner. She sobbed. I should have left him the first time he hurt you. I stepped closer and rested a hand on her shoulder. You were scared, honey, but tonight, you found your voice. That took more courage than you realize. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. I don't know what happens now. Now, I said quietly, we start over. For a long while, no one spoke. The fire crackled softly. Amos leaned his head on his mother's shoulder, and she held him tight, maybe for the first time in years without fear of being punished for it. It was almost midnight when the police cruiser finally pulled away. The storm had stopped, leaving the world outside blanketed in a clean, untouched layer of snow, a new beginning, pure and still. As I stood by the window, I thought of Martha again, how she used to remind me that healing doesn't happen all at once. It comes in small pieces, in moments when you choose love over fear. Behind me, I heard Leona whisper, Dad, can we stay here tonight? I turned, meeting her tired, tear-streaked face. You can stay as long as you need. I said, this house will always be home. For the first time that night, she smiled, a small, fragile smile, but real. I looked at the fire again and whispered softly to myself. We did it, Martha. The boy's safe now. The clock ticked past midnight. Outside, the snow fell gently again, quiet, forgiving. Inside, for the first time in years, Our family was safe. 4 months passed, and winter gave way to spring. The snow melted off the roof. The yard turned green again, and the house that had once been silent now echoed with laughter, music, and the sound of life returning. The morning sun poured through the kitchen window as Leona flipped pancakes on the griddle. Humming softly to the radio, Amos sat at the table, reading a letter with shaking hands and an expression that I hadn't seen on him in years. Hope. Full scholarship, he said for maybe the 10th time that week. Still not believing it. They're actually paying me to go to college. I smiled over my coffee mug. Ohio State doesn't hand those out to just anyone. Son, you earned it. Leona turned, setting a fresh stack of pancakes on his plate. See? I told you all those nights studying would pay off. She looked lighter now. The deep shadows under her eyes were gone, replaced by something stronger, the quiet confidence of a woman rebuilding her life. After Wilbur's arrest, the months that followed were hard. There were court hearings, depositions, and long days of waiting. But the evidence was solid: photos, witness statements, and Leona's testimony sealed the case. Wilbur was convicted of child endangerment and given 2 years of probation with mandatory counseling. He lost his job and moved out of town to live with his sister in Cleveland. The day the sentence was handed down, Leona walked out of the courthouse holding Amos's hand, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't look afraid. Now she worked part-time at the local library, finding joy in quiet things again: books, community events, helping kids with homework. The house we shared had grown into a small sanctuary of its own, 3 people bound not just by blood, but by the decision to choose each other every single day. Leona looked up from the stove. Dad, are you sure you don't mind us staying here? I know you value your peace. Peace? I chuckled. I've had enough silence to last me a lifetime. This is better. This is family. Amos grinned. Besides, who else would keep you from burning dinner? Grandpa? Watch it, college boy, I said, but I was smiling too. The phone rang, and Leona wiped her hands on a towel before picking it up. Burke Residence, she said, her voice steady, proud. Oh, hi, Jake. Yeah, he's here. Guitar practice at 4? Sure, I'll tell him. She hung up and turned to Amos. Your friend's waiting. You two are performing at that talent show next week, right? Amos nodded, a spark of excitement lighting up his face. Yeah, we're doing a few classic rock songs. Grandpa's favorite kind. Good, I said, just don't butcher Zeppelin. He laughed. No promises. After breakfast, Leona and I cleaned up while Amos went to get his guitar from the living room. The sound of tuning strings filled the house, warm and gentle. Leona glanced toward him and whispered, He's healing, isn't he? Every day, I said. You both are. She paused, her hand resting on a plate. I still wake up some nights thinking I'll hear his voice, yelling. I set the dish down and met her eyes. That'll fade with time. The quiet you have now, it's the right kind. You earned it. That afternoon, we worked in the garden out back. Martha's old vegetable patch, which had been empty for years, was alive again. Tomatoes, beans, herbs sprouting under the warm spring sun. The smell of soil and growth filled the air. Leona knelt beside me, pulling weeds. You know, if you hadn't shown up that day. Don't, I interrupted gently. The past is behind us. No, she said, looking up, her eyes bright with tears. You risked everything to save him. You could have been arrested, charged, but you didn't care. I smiled faintly. That's what grandfathers do. We show up, even when it's late. She nodded, and we worked in silence for a while. The good kind. The kind that says everything without needing words. That evening, we settled into our familiar rhythm. Dinner at 6, a movie or a game show after, and Amos strumming the guitar softly by the fire. Leona was doing a crossword puzzle on the couch, and I was reading the paper, half listening to the melody drifting through the air. After a few minutes, Amos set the guitar down and said quietly, Grandpa? Yeah? I've been thinking about changing my major, from engineering to social work. I looked up, curious. Social work? He nodded. I want to help kids who go through what I did. Maybe I can make sure no one else feels that helpless again. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. The same boy who had once sat frozen on a doorstep now wanted to dedicate his life to saving others. Martha would have been proud. That's a fine idea, I said finally. The world could use more people like you. He smiled, small and genuine. Thanks, Grandpa. Later that night, after Leona went to bed, Amos and I stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cool, the stars scattered bright across the sky. The same oak tree that had watched over this house for decades stood tall, its branches whispering in the wind. You think we'll catch anything this year? He asked, grinning. Fishing season's almost here, I said. If we're lucky, maybe a big one this time. He laughed. You always say that. I looked at him, really looked at him, taller now, steadier, carrying the quiet strength of someone who had survived and grown. Amos, I said softly, thank you for holding on. He turned, surprised. What do you mean? For surviving long enough for me to find you. He swallowed hard, his voice low. Thank you for coming. The night stretched quiet and peaceful around us. No shouting, no fear, just the hum of crickets, the smell of spring, and 2 generations standing side by side, finally free. The months rolled on like calm water after a storm. Summer came early that year, warm and bright, and the garden behind my house exploded with color. The air smelled of basil, tomatoes, and freshly cut grass, the kind of smell that meant life was moving forward again. One Sunday morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains as I brewed coffee and listened to the low hum of the radio. Amos's guitar rested against the couch, a reminder of the music that had returned to this house, not just sound, but spirit. Leona's laughter floated from the kitchen as she packed a basket for the community picnic. For the first time in a long time, everything felt normal. It was the kind of peace I didn't think we'd ever get back. Dad, Leona called from the kitchen. You coming with us or planning to nap the day away? Old men don't nap, I said, walking in with 2 mugs. We recharge strategically. She rolled her eyes but smiled. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Amos came in wearing a faded Ohio State t-shirt and a grin that could have lit the room. Guess what? Jake and I got invited to play at the summer fair next month. They're even paying us. Paying you to make noise? I teased. Now I've heard everything. He laughed. The easy, unguarded kind that used to be rare. Yeah, you'll be front row, right? Wouldn't miss it for the world, I said. We spent that afternoon at the town park, surrounded by laughter, barbecue smoke, and the buzz of people who hadn't seen each other since winter. Amos helped set up tables while Leona volunteered at the bake sale booth. Watching them move freely, confidently, made something in me loosen, the weight I'd been carrying since the night I kicked that door in. I remembered every detail of that night, the way the cold burned my face, the sound of the door splintering, the silence that followed, and now, standing here under the open sky, I realized something simple. That act hadn't just saved Amos. It had saved all of us. Leona came over, handing me a slice of apple pie. You okay, Dad? You look a million miles away. Just thinking, I said, about how far we've come. She smiled softly. You mean since Thanksgiving? Since before that, I said. Since Martha. Since we all forgot what showing up really means. Her eyes shimmered a little, but she nodded. She'd be proud of us. She would, I agreed, and she'd probably say the weeds in that garden are a disgrace. Leona laughed, a full, beautiful laugh that turned heads nearby. It had been years since I'd heard it, the real one. Later that evening, back at the house, Amos was sitting on the porch steps tuning his guitar. The sun dipped low, painting the world gold and pink. I joined him, 2 cups of sweet tea in hand. He strummed softly, eyes focused on the horizon. You know, Grandpa, I think I finally understand what Grandma used to say. What's that? That family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who shows up when it matters. I nodded slowly, feeling Martha's words echo through time. She was right then. She's still right now. He looked over at me, smiling. You showed up. I put a hand on his shoulder. So did you. Behind us, the porch light flicked on. Inside, Leona hummed while washing dishes. The radio playing some old classic rock tune, one Martha and I used to dance to in the kitchen. The same song Amos had been learning for the fair. It hit me then, how pain can pass through generations. But so can love, and love, if you choose it, always wins in the end. Amos plucked a slow, familiar rhythm on the guitar, the first chords of Stairway to Heaven. I smiled. Now that's how you don't butcher Zeppelin. He laughed, shaking his head. You'll always remind me, won't you? Every chance I get, I said, sipping my tea. As the stars came out, we sat in silence, not the lonely kind, but the kind filled with meaning. The porch creaked under our weight. The wind carried the smell of summer flowers. And I felt Martha's presence in every heartbeat. Leona stepped out a few minutes later, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked at us, at the peaceful night, and whispered, "Feels like home again, doesn't it?" "It is home," I said, "always has been. We just had to find our way back." Amos nodded, his eyes reflecting the porch light. "You know, Grandpa, I think this is what healing looks like." "Yeah," I said softly, "this is what healing sounds like too." He started playing again, slow and steady, as the night wrapped around us, three people who'd been broken and rebuilt. Bound not by perfection but by love that refused to quit. Family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who walks through the storm, who kicks down the door, who stays until you're warm again. And as the stars shimmered over the quiet street, I knew Martha was smiling somewhere, proud of the family that finally remembered how to show up. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who believes that real family shows up when it matters most. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge in Silence for more stories of courage, love, and justice that change lives forever. Tell us in the comments, what does family mean to you?